Hey guys, I hope in this video to actually install the chassis and the speakers in the cabinet and get it playing. Right now, what I've got out is both the original set of speakers that came with it and the set that I've been using for the past couple weeks. Here is the larger one. If you recall, it was rusty, as was the smaller one. So I've been working a little bit with navel jelly and then some T9 to get rid of the corrosion and help it not to come back. So this is all nice and clean. So I was thinking about getting ready to put the cone back in, and I noticed something. The cone is right behind me. So here it is. It's fairly easy to get out. It's held in by screws, but there was some adhesive I had to kind of scrape off. And when I did, I found it was quite corroded, so you can see the traces of the rust all around the rim. So I'm thinking whatever glue they used must have reacted with the metal over time. Either that or whatever the strip material was. Seems like cardboard, basically absorbed and held in moisture against the metal. But that's not what I was curious about. What I was curious about is the cone material itself. So you may notice there's a difference. The inside and the spider are the same type of material, but look at the surround. The original has this kind of mesh fabric material. It's rather flexible. Whereas this one, it's just crimped speaker cones and cracked in one spot. Now these came from 15X. These came from the original 15DX. They used the same chassis, different cabinets, and I assumed they used the same speakers, but well, maybe not. But it also may have been a production change, because these had that, on the end of the cable was a connector, and I know they used that in later productions. In fact, there was another very nice example of a Philco 15DX on Flickr. I'll include a link in the description to it, and you can see what I hope to get mine looking like someday. But if you look on the back of that chassis, it's got a hole cut and it's got a socket on it, and the speakers are plugged into it. So I've got the older version of it. So even though they only made I think 13 or 1400 DXs, even in that small production run, there was a change. And I'm thinking maybe there was in the 15X as well. So maybe if you had an early 15X, it would have had this type of speaker. Or were these slightly higher grade speakers? I don't know, but I do recall that the designator on the back of the speaker is what's shown in the service info. I think it's H17 or something like that. Or H7, and that's what they show in the service info, and that's what's in the parts list, is an H7 type speaker. So I don't know, but I'm thinking, which cone should I put back in the set? This one, I'll repair that little ding, or this. For that matter, I probably could use the speaker as is, now that I got most of the corrosion off. If you recall, these were really nasty, and I spent some time removing the rust and painting them, and the rust was starting to come back and pits were forming. And when I saw this nice set on eBay, I just said, nah, forget these, I'll just go with these nicer ones. But I bet these would work alright. I don't know, something to think about, because none of this cone's been repaired. You can see it works just fine. So which one flexes better? I gotta say, this does feel like it's got a nicer feel to it. It feels like this edge material works better. Alright, so anyway, enough about those two. Let's take a look at the smaller two, which are also different, which is also a bit of a surprise. But in this case, it's the other way around. This is a slightly nicer design, I think. Cone material appears to be identical, and this one's definitely in better condition. This one was quite torn, and I had trouble getting it out, because this was just glued to the speaker. No no frame, no screws holding it down. But check out this one. This does have a metal frame around the rim, and then it's bent over with like a clip at 4 points, or 8 points. Getting late, I can't count. So I wonder if you were to bend these back a little bit and lift this ring off, would the cone come out? Is it even glued down to the frame? I don't know. But I'm definitely going to go with this one, because this, yeah, is very, very clearly in better condition. This one I got all the corrosion off. It's ready to pop back in the set. And this is, I think this was a K12 or something like that. That got kind of worn off when I removed the corrosion. And this one's probably, yeah, I painted over it, so it's been obliterated. Now, regardless of however I mix and match these, I'll hang on to the spare parts in case I ever need them. So I'll make a decision and get these squared away. Well, actually, I can tell you right now what my decision is going to be. I'm going to go with this as is. I'm going to try putting this cone in the newer speaker and try that out. So one other very minor difference is they're very small flexible wires that go to the voice coil. And on these older speakers, it went through a little curly Q spring to hold the wires in place, which I kind of like. It's a nice system. These speakers, I do not like what they used, which is this clip here. It was very rusty under that clip. And the wires were basically like rusted in place, both pressure from the clip and then the corrosion. I had a hard time. I had between bending this up and trying to get the wires out without breaking anything, and I couldn't really get all the corrosion out. It's just too tough to get down in there, and it's just riveted in place. And just try to drill that out. Well, look what's on the other side of it. It's the frame for the field coil, so not so easy to deal with. So if I flexed it a few times, I think if I bend this much more, it's just going to snap off at some point. So when I put this back together, I'll just do the best I can to bend this up and try to get the wires under there. Oh, and of course, the other reason I took the cone off of this was so that I could mount the output transformer. Now that I can get at it from the other side, I can run some bolts down through there. And when I reattach the cone, should I use adhesive or should I not? Because it was definitely glued down before. However, this material on both of them, the outer material is the same. It's just the cardboard. You see the screws kind of bite into it. And yeah, I could put washers around them. That'd probably be good enough to hold it down, but I guess since I want to hear how this cone works out, I'll put it in with just the screws. And if it sounds really good, probably should put a little adhesive, because what I fear is that if I just use screws, it'll vibrate a little bit against the frame. And after a long time of playing, it may eventually start to wear through. Actually, these have washers, or their screws have inherent washers. The screws, again, it's curious the difference. The screws that held these down, I'll dig one out and show you. They're just, I think, just regular flathead screws, whereas these have a nice kind of washer effect going on. I had the screws soaking in some evapor-rust because they were corroded, so here they are, just basically plain old sheet metal screws. And here's one of the other screws, so you can see, definitely different construction. Question is, will these nicer screws fit into these holes? I think so. Yeah, it's the same thread pitch. Cool. So again, I'll mix and match the best parts. I'll put this cone with these screws onto this frame. After I got this frame all cleaned up, I figured I should do something to protect it a little more than just the T9, so I masked off the center area here and sprayed it with clear enamel. I didn't want to get it down here, I didn't want to clog up the voice coil gap. And down in here, I just did smear the T9. So that's dried up. Hit the outside a little bit too, especially where the output transformer is going to mount. So I think it's all good to start getting ready to put the cone back in. So first I got to remember, before I put the cone in, I got to mount the screws on this. And for the cone, I removed the cone that I've chosen to use from the other speaker. And I'm inspecting it, brushing some dust off of it. And I noticed that in this area right here, a little condition issue, it's separated a little. So I'm going to take a toothpick and some glue and get it down in there. See what I mean? There, that's separated. So do that down, and it should be good to go. Oh, actually, no, there's one other thing I want to do. Remember, this came out of a rusty speaker frame, and the voice coil was rubbing. I think it might have worn a little bit of the enameled coating off that voice coil, so I'm going to brush on a real thin layer. Make sure that stays protected. Don't want that shorting out against the frame. Alright, and that'll be that. And here's the frame it came out of, so I spent all my time removing the rust and priming this frame. And don't look too bad from this side, but you can see the rust is definitely coming back. And on the other side, looks a bit worse. Down in there. And all around, I guess that's from outgassing. This was really, really rusty and pitted, and I got it down to bare metal, then put on some rusty metal primer, and then bound to a glazing compound. I got a feeling it's the glazing compound that's been outgassing and causing the paint to pop off. Oh well, it's an interesting exercise, learning experience, for sure. Alright, I'll get this prepped up, get that installed, and then I'll get the speaker board out from the radio and start putting this all back together. Oh, one other thing. In the last video, I showed the underside of the chassis, and I'd mentioned I was replacing those blue resistors with these Vichy, a little bit more robust resistors. And notice on the packaging, the country of origin. It's actually India. So not everything is made in China these days. At least this series of resistors from Vichy is made in India. Alright, so that's the speaker ready to go into the cabinet. Output transformer securely mounted down. Get the voice coil wires going through a little clip, soldered over to these lugs. There's a cover that will eventually go over this, but not until this gets mounted to the speaker board, the other speaker wired in. So I've been going over to the cabinet preparing for that. Took a bunch of screws out of it that were corroded and put them in Evaporust to clean them up. So these are screws that hold the cabinet together, and these are the screws that hold the speaker board in. All those nice and cleaned up. And I took out the speakers there were in there, which was the other set of speakers. So there's the speakers that came with it, there's these speakers, and then these are the intermediate ones, the Wheeler speakers, which I don't remember them being quite so corroded. But these are the ones I actually did first power the radio up with. I don't know if they were this rusty before or they got worse since, but I don't know what it is about these speakers, but maybe it's just my bad luck, I don't know, but all of these speakers I get are just caked with rust. Corrosion. And I thought this was curious. Well, this speaker does not have a Philco number on it. Let's see. On the bottom here, it looks like it's K something, whereas this was H7. Maybe that was an H, I don't know. But what was interesting is this. Part number 2565T. 2565T. So this output transformer is identical, so definitely hang on to that. In fact, I could have unscrewed or drilled out the rivets on this, and I guess just transplanted that one as is. So it's nice to have all these options. Also, keep in mind I do have another radio project upcoming, a Philco 118 MX that uses push-pull 42 outputs as well, so that, who knows, I may need another one of these. And something else interesting, I think, is the cone. So this is yet a third type of cone. And this does have the same type of screws with that flange, but it's not the black cone material, it's brown, or light brown, tan. And well, it's funny to see how frozen these are, yet these speakers did actually produce sound. So, I don't know, I guess I'll hang on to all these extra speaker parts, but now I basically have two rusty, messed up pairs of speakers that I don't really have any immediate use for. So here is the speaker board for this radio. Now, back when I got it, the grill cloth was in pretty miserable condition, so I just tore it out of there. Because at the time, reproduction grill cloth was readily available. So I ordered up a chunk that I think was 24 inches by 18 inches. But I made a little mistake. I didn't specify which way the pattern should run. In hindsight, I should have gotten a 24 by 24 so I could orient it either way. So it turns out this is not the way the pattern originally ran. It would be the other way, rotated 90 degrees. So I just hastily put on a few globs of glue and stapled it in place. Well, a short while later, suddenly the grill cloth supply dried up. So now the grill cloth that I just hastily tacked in place was all I had. Now they have started making reproductions of some patterns again, but I don't believe they have this one yet. But there's still a good chance that it will become available. However, I was just examining this more closely, and it turns out that the glue I used did not hold very well at all. And the staples were easy to pull out. So I'm going to be able to pull this whole piece off and reuse it. And get the tension a little bit better. Basically, the problem was that it was stretched pretty good top to bottom and not very good left to right, so there were some wrinkles running vertically. But I also want to take this off because some of the screws that secure the speakers are rusty and loose. See, the way this works is the screw heads are on the other side underneath the grill cloth. So once the grill cloth is on, there's no way to, say, put a screwdriver in here on this side to hold the screw in place while you tighten the nuts down on the speaker. So what happened with some of these is screw heads got loose, and as you tighten the nuts, the whole screw just starts turning, and there's no way that you can brace it on the other side. Well, with grill cloth out of the way, I can. And I can also get that corrosion off. Remember, this radio had spent some time in some dampness. No doubt its basement had flooded. So, of course, the corrosion is worse down at the bottom than higher up. And then you can see pretty clearly the outline where the speakers go. And I'm pretty sure that at some point in the past I sprayed some shellac on this. I might spray a little bit more to get it on the inside surface here, just to kind of seal the wood off a little bit. It's not musty or anything, but it doesn't hurt while I've got it all out and apart. Seal off up the wood so you can see how loose this screw is. I'm not entirely sure what the best way is to stabilize them. I suppose with the grill cloth off, I could install the speakers and tighten them down and then install the grill cloth. But if I ever want to get the speakers off, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how they did it originally. I guess originally they probably did just attach the speakers and then install the grill cloth. And installing grill cloth, as I've mentioned before, is not something I particularly enjoy or am very good at, but I have read about some better techniques, like involving taking a large piece of cardboard or some stiff material and attaching the grill cloth face down on that and getting it all stretched out and perfect, spring adhesive onto the board, and then lowering the board on top of the already stretched out grill cloth, rather than trying to stretch out the grill cloth in place on this while you've got glue on it. That seems like a promising technique. I'm installing the speakers on the speaker board now. Sprayed the board with a little bit of shellac to seal it first. Got the smaller speaker mounted. Now I'm doing the larger one. You may recall this has screws around the perimeter to hold the cone in place. Now I was wondering, how is that going to work out on this board when you're going to mount it like so? Aren't those screw heads going to mash into the wood? Yeah, and they thought of that, and they drilled holes partway through the board to accommodate those screw heads. So it just plops right down and locks into those holes like so. Right. I just gotta put in 4 screws, hook the wires back up together, and it's ready to go into the cabinet. Now that's without the grill cloth. I'll get to that later. All the hardware is nice and rust free now, but before I reinstall the speakers, I think I'll do some cleaning. So this radio clearly experienced some type of flooding, probably down in the basement, and this board has a layer of dirt that dried onto the wood. I'll get a damp cloth and clean that up as best I can, and also split out on the bottom, maybe shoot some glue in there and clamp that up. I'm not sure what this board is all about other than bracing. It's got some holes drilled into it, 2 on either side, but there's nothing that mounts it down there. And there's also these odd... Oh, I see why these holes are here. That's so the bottom bolts on. Huh, I wonder if that bottom section could come off. That would make re-veneering it a whole lot easier. Now that was my thought on the top as well, where I removed some bolts that came through these pockets. I thought the top would come off. No, it does not. It's firmly glued down. I think those bolts were just there to hold it in place while the glue's set up. So it's probably true of the bottom as well. We'll see. So yeah, there'll be a lot of work to do on this cabinet eventually. You can all around the entire back, all the veneer separating, all down. And then the veneer's just flat out gone along the bottom, but I'll get it all working electrically and get everything reinstalled, put the back on, and I don't know when I'll get to the cabinet. I'll save that for the future at some point. Well, I was able to clean most of the muck off of that board, but it's in worse condition than I realized. It's separating both top and bottom around all the sides. It's really bad on the back side. No easy way to get in there and glue and clamp that up. Plus I noticed the hardware down here is pretty rusty, so what I think I'll save for another day is take out all the screws and see if I can knock off these sideboards and take this board out and maybe end up replacing it entirely. For now though, I'm just going to put the radio back together. I thought this was kind of interesting. This is probably a handprint, fingerprint, of whoever assembled this radio way back in the day. It's like under the finish. It's not from my hand, I'm pretty sure. Alright, so here is the top side. I want to clean a little more gunk out up here. And I want to replace these too. One of them's already gone. Those are the rubber shock mounts the chassis would sit on. You can see these are all nasty and hardened and shrunk up. So I can get this one out. Yeah, I'll take a scraper and get it out of there. So, the question is, do I have anything on hand suitable? If not, I'll have to order some up. Those are for mounting tuners or tuning capacitors. Some of those. Screws. Corner blocks. These are way too thick. Nope. Well, I guess I will definitely order some up. These are the only set of 4 I've gotten. I think these are much too thick. If I was to go with these, the holes in the front wouldn't line up. So I'll just leave these hardened ones in place and find a little something to shim under that one. Maybe I can reuse this old dried up one that actually, it's not that bad. That's probably why I saved it. Looks like it's a little bit smaller in diameter. It's similar thickness though as to what these would have been before they got crushed down. Yeah, it's a little bit too small in diameter because the opening for the bolt is quite large. Well, figure something out for now. You can get these from a few places. Radio Days, Renovated Radios, I think. Probably a few others. Now I'm finally getting around to installing a reproduction clock covered AC line cord. I cut back about 6 inches of the outer braid, tied an underwriter's knot to keep it secure, and put some service cement on the cloth to keep it from fraying. Wired one side right into the set. The other has an inline 2-amp fuse, and then this goes off to the power switch. I'll slide some heat shrink tubing over that fuse. And on the other end, I'm going to use one of these reproduction plugs. Now, if I just used it as is and put the cord in here, it would really be flopping around inside that plastic. So I'm going to take one of these strain reliefs, stick it in the end, again strip back the braid, thread it through, screw onto these terminals, and then tighten down the screws that hold this yellow part into the brown plastic, and that should be it. And then I can reinstall the piece of sheet metal that goes over the whole bottom of the chassis. Here it is with the bottom plate installed, and I threw in a light bulb. Got it plugged into my pt16o, and make sure I don't make any mistakes. Alright, cool. Now there is some fraying on the wires that go to the speaker, but I think for now I'll just throw a little service cement on that to keep the fraying from getting any worse and just leave it alone. Well, it seems getting these controls to line up isn't going to be quite so easy as I had hoped. So these are about 7/16 too thick. If I use these, none of them line up. So I've dropped it down to some 3/8 spacers, and now this control and tuning are dead center, but the power switch is too high and this control is way too high. Now it turns out that the outer controls are adjustable. They're mounted on slotted holes in the chassis, so I can move them up and down pretty easily. So those are the least of my concerns. The power switch cannot be moved. Hole right into the chassis and it's screwed into that. It's not going anywhere, so that's the one I got to go off of. The one right above it, the tuner, that's the one where I replaced the rubber mounts. So if I lower this chassis down such that this is dead center, this is going to be too low. The only way I can raise that up is to put thicker rubber mounts on that big tuning capacitor, or if I'm lucky, I tightened it down more than I needed to, and I can just loosen up the screws and the rubber. I use mounts similar to these, and maybe I've got to tighten down really tight, and if I loosen it up, I might have enough leeway that this will be centered. Looks like I'm off about 1/4 of an inch, so that seems a little unlikely. So worst case scenario, I'm going to lower this down. The power switch will be nice and centered. I can raise up 2 outer ones, and I may have to swap out the rubber mounts for that tuning capacitor, which is not a trivial thing to do because I have to disconnect. There's 4 or 5 lugs. Well, I have to pull the whole chassis out, take the bottom off, unsolder all the connections to it, unmount it, find thicker rubber mounts, and then put it all back together, and then try to get it into the cabinet. So, oh, fun. I pulled the chassis out for a closer look, and I should have realized sooner that the tuning capacitor is definitely down too low. There are 2 large rubber mounts under it on either side, and they're so short that basically the capacitor is just resting on the chassis, whereas it should be floating on those two rubber mounts. I need to add, well, you can basically see from here, I need to add, an eighth of an inch, maybe more. And I'm not really happy with the mounts I've got underneath the chassis either. So I placed an order with renovated radios. I needed to get some other stuff anyways. Like for my 38.7 chair side, I got some rubber mounts for that as well. So those should arrive in a few days. In the meantime, something else. The chassis is not forward as far as it should be, which I think also might be an issue with this tuning capacitor. Because with the shaft only sticking out that far, the knob just barely fits on. And it's just barely hanging on the end of that shaft. I can't push it on any further. That's just going to fall off. So somehow, but this is as far forward as it'll go. You can see the dial scale is almost right up against the escutcheon. So I think that when I remounted that, maybe I didn't do it quite right. The other shafts are okay though, which is odd for the tone and the volume and the power. So I'll just have to pull the whole thing apart again. But in the meantime, I do have it plugged in. The speakers aren't wired in, and I pulled the 80 rectifier, but at least now we can finally see what that light bulb looks like up inside the speaker enclosure. So I got a couple different bulb styles. I'll try the cylindrical one first. I'll turn off the overhead lights too, so you can get a better effect. I think this is only a 15 watt bulb, so I'm not expecting it to be too bright. And here it finally is, lit up. So I got a 25 watt bulb in there, which I think is what was in there originally. Which results in kind of an eerie lighting to the speaker area. So there's a bulb up in there. There's a piece of wood behind it. It doesn't act so much as a reflector as it does sort of a shield to keep the light from hitting right back here, so it actually kind of casts a shadow here. So the light really kind of comes to the front and then kind of bathes the whole insides with a bit of light. I like it. So I placed my order for some washers. They should be here in a few days, and when they do, hopefully I can get this thing straightened out and all the controls will line up. And we can finally hear it play inside the cabinet.